Hi, this is Rahman Sheikh. Welcome to Fortnightly Railway Transportation Systems podcast. I am the host and railway systems specialist working in this industry for 24 years and counting. This podcast is primarily focused on railway experts who have vast amount of experience and contributed greatly to this amazing industry. This is not a technical seminar but focuses on feel good stories, individual journeys, their success and failures, motivating younger generation to kickstart their career in railways and creating a sense of pride for the railway people who devoted their lives on the most environment friendly public transportation. Welcome listeners to Railway Transportation Systems podcast, where we delve into the stories, insights of exceptional individuals shaping industries and making a significant impact. Today we are honored to have Maggie Simpson, an accomplished professional with a distinguished career that spans the realms of business and technology. Maggie, whose LinkedIn profile boasts an impressive OBE, the Order of the British Empire, and has not only achieved recognition for her outstanding contributions but has also become a symbol of leadership and inspiration in her field. With a wealth of experience and commitment to fostering collaboration, Maggie has navigated through challenges, led diverse teams, and championed causes close to her heart. Join us in this episode as we uncover the unique journey of Maggie Simpson, gaining valuable insights into her leadership philosophy, the dynamic intersection of business and technology in her career, and the lessons she has learned along the way. Get ready for an engaging conversation with a trailblazer who continues to shape the future of a railway industry or our railway industry. Welcome, Maggie, to Railway Transportation Systems podcast.
Thank you, Raymond. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking to you today.
Likewise. Let's kick off with my first question, which is generic to everyone. Can you share a bit about your professional journey and how you got started?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm imagining some of the guests that you have on this podcast had a career plotted out really all the way through their life, and I'm afraid that wasn't me really. I graduated back in the early 90s with a degree in maths and engineering, and I just looked for a job, and I was lucky enough to find a job with a consultancy who were working in safety and risk management in big industrial sectors, and they'd spent the 1980s doing most of their work in the oil and gas industry. But as we've moved into the 90s, the UK government were looking towards privatising the rail industry, and also on the back of some terrible accidents in the late 80s, there was a real move in the railways to work on safety risk management techniques. And so as a small consultancy, we began to pick up work in that area. And, I found I rather liked the rail industry. We went out and about a lot. We did a lot of training programs, met a huge number of people. And I just sort of found it was an industry, an interesting point in its life with some terrific people. And so when I got a bit bored with consultancy, I went and took a job in government in one of their railway agencies, which at the time was involved with privatisation of the passenger rail industry in the UK. So government had split it out into units, and they'd been franchised, and we were in the first stage of that contract management working in the passenger rail industry. And I did that for a little while, and the organisation that I was in began to change and evolve into more of a strategic body. And at that point it acquired some new teams, and some new people came along to do some different things as well, around some more network planning and more strategic thinking. And I guess around that point I had begun to get a little bit bored with passenger contract management, and one day I strolled into the office of the newly appointed freight director and said the memorable words to her, "Julia, I'm bored. Have you got anything I can do?" And she started to laugh, and it's fair to say I've been in rail freight ever since, really. So she saw a willing candidate, and I joined her team. And so as what became known as the Strategic Rail Authority grew, the rail freight team grew. We ended up as a team of 20 or 30 people writing a rail freight strategy for the UK. I did that for a little bit, and we'll come back to the journey of UK rail freight in a moment. But I did that until about 2004, when both I went on maternity leave with my first child, and also the Strategic Rail Authority was folded and absorbed back into government. So we parted ways at that point, and again, coincidences happened. So a colleague that I'd known for a while who ran the Rail Freight Group, which is a member-led trade association in rail freight, rang me up, and my daughter, who's now a university student, she was just one, and said, did I want to go and do a little bit of work for him? And so I arrived at the Rail Freight Group in the start of 2005, and I've been there ever since. Obviously, that's been an evolving journey. I went in just to help out with some of their promotion and policy work, and eventually I've ended up running the place. And that role's evolved over time, and the Rail Freight Group is seen now as sort of the voice of rail freight in the UK, and we represent about 130 member companies within our organisation. They're all businesses who are involved in rail freight in the UK. It's a brilliant job, and it's a privilege to be in that industry.
It is. And now you're the Director General of Rail Freight, right? Wow, amazing, amazing journey.
Yeah. So Rail Freight Group, is business, is a micro business. We have, there are 7 of us, but we're all part-time, so we're about 3 full-time equivalents. What we have our strengths from is our membership base. And as I've said, that's 130 companies. So that's people who pull freight trains, the train operators. It's in customers, it's ports, it's quarries, it's supermarkets, shipping lines, warehouse developers and builders, people who make wagons, technology companies, and a whole host of businesses who are united by that interest in seeing rail freight prosper and grow. So it's a fascinating place to be because it takes you right across the economy as a country, really, and seeing all different sectors, all different interests coalescing around that common cause. It's a fabulous place to be.
Yes, it is. It sounds very fascinating as well. Let's move to my next question. In your opinion, what are the current trends and future challenges in the rail industry?
Yes, I think you've got listeners around the globe, and rail freight is a global business, but of course in different countries it plays differently. And I know a lot of your listeners are in Australia, where some of the rail freight operations that I'm very envious of them in terms of their scale and their development. And if we look to the US with the massive railroads there that span the country, where rail freight is very much the dominant player, but actually in the UK that isn't the case. So like much of Western Europe, the railways are dominated by the movement of passenger trains. And we have in the UK a very congested, busy, mixed traffic railway, and freight has to wend its way across that network, finding it's right to be there often. A lot of people are brought up in the passenger railway, and they see that as as the most important thing. And part of our job is to persuade them otherwise on that. But that congestion and that busyness brings its own challenges. So one of the big things that is a headache for us is making sure that our members can grow, can put more trains on the network, have the space on the network to grow. And the UK government, has actually just published a target for rail freight growth. So it's set an aspiration to see rail freight grow by 75% out to 2050. And that's going to mean, to meet that target, we're going to need those paths on the network. So that in the UK is a real challenge. But it's a good thing because we all want rail freight to grow. And, the reason we want it to grow is manifold, but particularly around decarbonisation. Rail freight is still predominantly a diesel business in the UK, and not exclusively, but predominantly. But even so, we make, only a third of the carbon emissions that road freight does. So what we see is customers at the moment who are really driven to get carbon out of their supply chains, wanting to do more rail freight. So we've got a business, we've got a push from government to achieve that growth, which is great. And it's bringing some real new players, entrepreneurial thinking and challenge into the sector, as well as those customers drive forward to try and get more of their goods on rail. I mean, there are people in my membership who say we could have set a more challenging target, but the fact that government has set one at all is brilliant, because it means now their thinking and their planning has to take rail freight into account, because they've set
75% you are targeting in 2050. So what number do we have at current stage?
Well, so 75% is the growth they want to see. So they want to see, it's almost double. Let's be like that. Today we've got about 10% market share of surface freight transport, and I guess we are probably about 10% of the trains on the UK network, the rest being passenger. But actually it's not quite a fair reflection, because obviously there are some parts of road haulage that we can never touch. So the last delivery to the shop or the parcel that lands up in your letterbox, rail freight can never be in that part of surface transport. If you looked at other sectors, if you look, for example, at containerised freight out of the big UK port, we're probably doing somewhere between a quarter and a third of the inland moves from that. If we look at construction construction materials, particularly coming down into the sort of London and the southeast corner. We're probably doing 40% of that. And we're seeing, that in construction materials, that trend now going into some of the other big conurbations as well. A really significant flows of rock, sand, gravel, construction products going into cities like Birmingham and even Manchester increasingly. So in some parts of the market, we're really dominant. In other parts, obviously, less so. So actually, yeah. So I think, going back to challenges, ones I'm sure we'll touch on, how do we make progress on decarbonising rail freight itself? And also, I know we want to talk about the role of technology, where we are on that technology journey. Because if we're going to achieve growth and decarbonise, then we're going to need more technology than we've got today.
Beautiful answer. As I spoke in my intro about your leadership, as a leader, especially in the rail industry, what key insights or experiences have shaped your approach to leadership, Maggie?
Yeah, it's a really good question because, as I said, I didn't really ever set out with a plan. And I think you find yourself sometimes just in a position where there's a space in the market and, you can choose to step into that space or choose not to. And I think what I came to realise was, that rail freight, in a way, is the underdog in the UK railway and it needed that voice. And so increasingly, I just stepped into that space to be that voice. And as I said, I don't lead a big team. So it's a question of leveraging on the strengths that you get from that membership and providing the face. And I think, when you put in that space, you have to understand the role that you're in. I don't lead a huge team. I don't have people who drive trains or undertake safety critical work. I don't have to deal with the complexity that a lot of my colleagues do on a day-to-day basis. And, I'm really grateful they're there to do that because, I've always been absolutely terrible in that sort of role. So you have to understand the role you're in, what you're doing, and try and support the people who are doing that day-to-day operational or otherwise roles. Give them some airtime. It's important to know where, therefore, you stand on a debate. Part of our role is campaigning role to try and get things to work better for rail freight. And you sort of have to decide where to pitch yourself in that. If you're too extreme in the debate, people probably won't listen to you. Equally, if you're too close to the solution, then you don't give other people space to actually really get into the details. So you have to think quite carefully about where you are. We try and pitch, I think, a sort of critical friend. So, we do try and work really collaboratively with government and the railway agencies, but always knowing that, we will be critical if we don't like it. And sometimes that might mean doing something that's uncomfortable for them, like being in the media or writing a rude letter or something, that we sort of reserve the right to do that. So just finding where we pitch is important. And I think the other thing that I've tried to do is to sort of be bigger than the industry in a way. So oftentimes, I'm sure it's true in every industry, it's certainly true of the rail industry, I think, is that we can be pretty insular. We spend a lot of time focusing on what's going on in our universe and the challenges and that we're battling. But actually, if you take that and place it into the sense of the wider economy or the wider transport network, you can not only can you get the perspective, but you can get that leverage. So we need, as an industry, to be talking more about challenges like road pricing or how road freight will decarbonise itself, or what's happening to steel industry or automotive production. We need to be knowledgeable about those things because actually that's why rail freight matters, because it helps those industries, etc. So I've always tried to be, sort of bigger than the question, if you like, try and help with that sense of place.
Yeah, all this, what you just said, is somehow linked to technology. So how is rail industry embracing technology, and what is your role in trying to build confidence in innovation and data?
Yeah, it's such an important topic. I'm personally, very lousy about that. Remind you've just seen the trouble I've had to get my headphones to connect. So I am absolutely not, somebody who intuitively does technology well. But what we've been trying to do with our membership, with our audience, is to make it clear that there's nowhere to go but to go down this pathway. Over the last 5-10 years, what we've been trying to do is showcase the best. So get people in the industry to understand what is happening, not only in rail in the UK and globally, but actually in other sectors as well. So, we've had people come to our meetings to talk about Formula One or buildings modelling or things that are happening in the passenger railway to try and showcase the best and highlight the gap. And actually in the last 3 or 4 years, it's sort of almost been like a running race of people going, yeah, I get this. And what we're seeing is a real step up now and uptake in the development of technology in rail freight. And some of that's been, building confidence through some quite small things, perhaps, but, apps for ground workers to help them enter trains into the industry systems, whereas before they, wrote it down on a piece of paper and faxed it to control. Now they can do that automatically, saving lots of time and reducing errors. There's some fabulous innovation around wagons. So, I'm not sure how it is in Australia, but in the UK, most wagons are pretty inert. They run around, as, two sets of bogies in a box, and actually putting data onto them is going to be transformative. And we've got a number of systems now in trial, looking at, I suppose, three power questions. One is, how do you get the power to the wagon? Secondly, how do you get the wagon to talk? So that sort of, transmitter challenge. But then, most critically, well, what is it that you want the wagon to tell you, and what are you going to do with it when you've got it? And that's the bit we need to come on to next, because, there are lots of wagons. They're not all owned by the same people. They're not all operated by the same train operators. So trying to understand how they're all going to talk to each other, that's the next exciting part of that journey. Yeah. And also trying to persuade, government and Network Rail, who run the infrastructure, to help, to support freight through their systems. So, they are doing some great stuff in the technology space, but a lot of the systems are quite elderly. So trying to see how we can collectively push to get those systems modernised, because that also will generate massive benefits out for us.
Well, I think so. It is very critical. However, you just said that you're not keenly involved in operational railway. How do you stay updated on the latest developments and ensure that you and your teams are equipped for the future?
Yeah, I think if you open a door, people will come through it. That is true. And as an organisation, and say to my team, if somebody asks you to do something, you say yes, unless there's a diary reason why you should say no. So we try and go everywhere and do everything, and that's why we're speaking today, and it's brilliant, because what it does is it stretches you into different places. So we're a small team, but we try and be out and about. And actually what happens a lot, I find, is we'll do something like an event, or we'll speak at a conference, and then people hear us and they go, I can help you with that, Maggie, and they'll come and see us. So we've got this constant stream of people bringing their ideas to us, and generally what we'll try and do is, if there's something there that resonates, we'll put them in front of our members at an event or a forum, or ask them to put something in our newsletter or on social media with us or something, so that we're constantly pushing those ideas out. Because I have a strong view, it's not my place to judge actually whether that's a really good idea or not. That it only needs one person out there to think it's a good idea, and we make progress, and I can't possibly police that. So we put out a lot of information from people who come to see us, and oftentimes that resonates with someone, and we see people taking it forward from there. Sometimes it doesn't, but that doesn't really matter. That's about how industry wants to take itself forward.
Yeah. As an influencer, Maggie, because you just spoke about people, a big part of your role is influencing others to support rail sector, from government to industry. How do you face this challenge, and what is the key to success?
Yes, so as I said, further up the podcast, I think, rail freight is often seen as a bit of an underdog, and that means that, we have to be making the case repeatedly, and actually made some huge progress in recent years with things like the growth target. The COVID pandemic, I think, meant that people woke up a lot more than they had to why freight transport is a really, really important thing. So we are in a much better place on that, but we have to keep making that point. So for some of the things that I think are really important, firstly, is to try and have consistent and clear messages. And actually, I think the rail freight sector in the UK is really good at that. If you went and spoke to pretty much any of our members and asked them what needs to happen, they'll give you a pretty consistent answer, because we talk about the same things all the time. And that's really helpful, because if government hears the same thing repeatedly, there's no confusion. We know what we're chasing. I think the other thing you have to remember is that it doesn't only need to be you speaking, and in fact it can be more powerful if there are different voices saying the same things. We work really closely with lots of other trade associations who might be in ports or quarrying or other parts of logistics, to try and make sure that we all understand each other's stress points, because that, I might go in and speak to the government ministers who are dealing with the railways, but if other colleagues are going in talking to ministers who deal with ports or the business of quarrying, then we amplify our messages many, many times over. So you have to think about what your messages are. You also have to think about who else can make that message for you, and in return you might be making messages for them as well, but keeping doing that consistently, and just making it to as many people as you can, actually. actually, and trying to get that all the leverage built up where you do.
Wow, great insights, Maggie. Thanks for sharing them. And what advice would you give to individuals aspiring to reach leadership positions in rail industry like you?
Yes, well, so I think the first thing is that, it's an amazing industry to be in. Pretty much, with very few exceptions, people are really nice. It attracts really decent, hard-working, committed people, and I see that wherever I look at it, not only in the UK, people are absolutely committed to doing the right thing for the railway. And it's also an industry that is economically hugely important. So I think if you want to stay in the industry and reach those leadership positions, it is absolutely a brilliant place to be. I mean, I think, in a way it's easy for me to say because I've not had to come up through a huge organisation with, all that goes with that. But I think, enjoy yourself, think big, think about the stretch where you are. Say yes to things, and I can't say that enough, really. The more things you do, the more you stretch yourself. I mean, I spent this week helping a colleague in a different organisation out with some interviewing. I hate interviewing, but actually you learn so much from that process yourself. So trying to do things that challenge you and stretch you and put you in front of different people, get to know your industry inside out. You can't always know everything, but know the details and also I think about what your USP as an individual is. What is it that's going to make you the leader, make you stand out? I was sort of lucky because I was in that trade association role that, bluntly, there aren't very many women in rail freight. And so I was in a place where I was quite easily able to get that profile, and that then helps you make that pitch. Not everybody gets that, but what is it that makes you that person that ought to be the leader?
Wow, great insights, Maggie. No wonder why you are a OBE. As I read out in my intro, your profile mentions an OBE. Congratulations. Could you tell us more about the accomplishment and its significance to your career?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, some of your listeners may know a little bit about the UK honour system, and it is an honour and a privilege to have the OBE. But obviously, the process is that somebody nominates you for that. You don't know who they are, you have to involve it. It sort of just turns up in the post, and so for me, the really nice thing is that somebody out there, I genuinely don't know who they were, thought that I ought to be put forward for that, and that's a reflection of not only on me but on the rail freight industry, that people thought that that we'd help to lead that success. I mean, I sort of reflect that there are a huge number of brilliant people out there who haven't been fortunate enough to be nominated, and so you have to be a little bit humble about it as well, because it's a reflection of the fact that somebody saw that and put that paperwork in, and lots of other people could equally well get one. In terms of its significance, I think it's nice to have that recognition, and it's nice that people thought that the rail freight industry was worthy of recognising. I'm not going to say, I don't flex it. I don't go, you should talk to me because that would be arrogant. So, but people know that you've got it, and it's sort of a sign, I suppose, of that you ought, people ought to listen to you. Some people would take it like that. Yeah.
Well deserved post nominals, Maggie. After listening to you for such a long time, what appears to me is collaboration. Collaboration appears to be a recurring theme in your role. How do you foster this collaboration and teamwork within your teams and organizations as well outside your team?
Yes, I mean, I think collaboration is, it's sort of a basic human instinct in a way. And I think, obviously within the business environment, there are, rules and commercials that have to be respected. But people generally want to talk to each other. They want to be together. They want to work together on common challenges. And so a lot of it for me, is about finding the ways, the places, the opportunities to bring people together. And if you do that and you sort of foster that environment, then people sort of do it for themselves, actually. So a big part of what we do as an organisation is that, that use the phrase networking opportunity. So we run a lot of events, and that's everything from, a member forum where we get together around a particular topic, whether that's digital or intermodal freight or whatever, and bring people together of common interest, or it might be conferences or events and meetings where we always have a social the night before, a dinner or something like that. Or sometimes we just have, drinks, or we have an industry leading Christmas lunch with about 800 people at that. And if you put people together in that environment, then they will look for those solutions, and we'll see new members join. And within 6 months, a year, they're starting to make those connections and do business. Sometimes you need to sort of just nudge that a bit to give some top it. Sometimes you might have to make people a little bit uncomfortable. We're pushing quite hard on data at the moment. I think, we're probably pushing as hard as we'll get away with it in saying to people, you need to be collaborating on this. But so you sort of have to give that stretch, and sometimes you have to go to the people who are a bit more reluctant and try and unpack their reluctance and bring them into the debate as well. But mostly for me, collaboration is about being nice, it's about being human, it's about getting people who want to work together into a space where they can do that.
Yeah, I do agree with that, Maggie. Since we spoke about UK rail freight a lot, do you have any stats about how much kilometer of railway the UK has rail freight specific, number of trains, and what to look in future, or where can we find this information?
Yeah, if people want information on UK rail freight, then you can go to our website and you can drop us a note, or you can sign up for our newsletter. So it's that simple, and we can direct you to that. As I said, we're about 10% of UK surface transport, and the number is something like 18 billion ton kilometres a year or something. But that's sort of in a way fairly meaningless. It's 1.8 million lorries off the road. You can quote all the statistics that you want to do. I think what is really great about UK rail freight is its participants, because we have 5 major freight train operators, of which 3 are particularly dominant, but actually huge investment coming in from the customers, the people at ports, what we'd call a rail freight interchange, which is rail link warehousing, people coming in and building that, who are often inward investment to the UK, big institutional investors. So we can look at the stats, but actually I think the journey that we've been on is that growth in participation and in investment, and that is really helping to stretch the art of the possible, because if, for example, when you put the warehouse next to the railhead, you can use rail in a way that 10 years ago we would never have imagined possible. So it's been a real journey.
It is very informative. Lastly, looking ahead, what goals or projects you are most excited about in the coming months or years?
Yes, so we've already spoken about technology, and that is it's a huge opportunity to modernise what we do and become more productive. The bit we've not spoken about too much, I think, is decarbonisation, and that is a huge thing in all aspects. It's driving growth today. As I said, when people want to decarbonise their supply chains, we need to look at the opportunity for what we can do to decarbonise rail freight itself. So we're campaigning for more electric wires in the UK, but also what's the role for alternative fuels and so on and so forth. But the really exciting bit for me is how rail freight can help other industries decarbonise themselves. So, we're in the beginnings of conversations about what rail could do to move liquid hydrogen, for example, where, the UK is a very windy place. There's lots of offshore wind happening that will generate green hydrogen. How can we help move that? What about liquid carbon? If we're going into carbon capture and storage, places that the pipelines don't reach, we can help with. Some of our steel making is converting over to electric arc. That's going to mean the movement of waste metal and scrap at a scale that's never been seen before. And rail has to be part of that. So there's some huge excitement there, I think, about how rail freight can grow by helping other people decarbonise themselves. And, that's something which I think is going to really start to grow in the next decade.
Wow, very informative talk. I really enjoyed listening to you and known a lot of things about UK rail freight and many other businesses you do. Thank you. Thank you for joining this podcast, Maggie.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting me.
I believe everyone listening to this podcast has got something to take away from today's discussion. If you like this podcast, please listen, follow, and share this podcast within your network. If you believe we should be sharing your story or someone within your network, there is a railway leader who should be here sharing his or her contribution to this industry, contact me on railwaytransportationsystems@gmail.com. Thank you for your time today. See you next fortnight. Until then, stay safe and take care of yourself.